35 kilometers from the border, a convoy crept forward under radio silence and camouflage. Overhead, AI-fed intercepts traced every axle and antenna. Ukraine waited. When the clock hit 0, 10 jammers lit the sky with electromagnetic fog, and 25 FPV drones dove for the soft spots, tank tops, and air defense eyes. In this video, we retrace those 15 minutes. The routes, the frequency playbook, and the warhead placements that broke a $2.7 billion bet on heavy armor. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. 10 small drones switched on and a billion-dollar column went deaf. How does a shoebox jammer silence tanks built to survive missiles? Start with the problem. The convoy rolled under radio silence with armor spaced to reduce blast overlap and air defense vehicles tucked inside the formation. Their electronic camouflage shaved their signature, while ISR orbiting nearby fed bearings, tracks, and likely jammer footprints to the column's C2. On paper, that mix should shrug off cheap threats. Anything loud enough to matter would also make itself a target. Artillery could reach them, but the first salvo would light up friendly batteries for counterfire. A manned ambush would need to sit inside the kill sack and accept the risk. And FPV drones flying straight into a live EW bubble? They'd get bent off course, spoofed into the dirt, or clipped by a gunner watching a stabilized sightline. So the plan hinged on time, not firepower. Wave 1's job was to punch a hole in the air, not the metal, and hold it open for a quarter hour. Each jammer drone carried a compact software-defined radio stuffed with a power-boosted transmitter and high-gain directional antennas on gimbals. They weren't broadcasting white noise everywhere, they were hitting specific seams. Data links for the convoy's air defense nodes. Radar side lobes where the signal is weaker and easier to contaminate. The payloads leaned into efficiency. Enough ERP to scramble short-range receivers without tipping off distant monitors too soon, and just enough battery to loiter through the window. The frequency playbook looked like a chess clock. VHF and UHF shots aimed at comms and data handshakes. Short, sharp harassment in L-band and S-band to smear search sweeps and queuing radars. GNSS denial. Not to erase navigation outright, but to corrupt the periodic updates that correct drift. Each drone rotated bands in microcycles, matching hop patterns with offset timings so a single switch wouldn't shake them off. The sweeps overlapped in time, but not in phase, stacking interference without wasting energy. Getting there mattered as much as what they transmitted. The swarm hugged the ground on ingress, using tree lines and shallow folds to lower line of sight and force radar look-down clutter. They popped up into orbit stacks from different bearings, the nearest at the edge of small arms reach, the farthest out of practical gun range. Those orbits formed overlapping cones of interference that met over the column's center. With multiple look angles, the return paths bounced off hulls and road berms, creating multi-path haze. Receivers inside the formation now saw their own reflections louder than the outside world. The team expected countermeasures. Adaptive beamforming tries to notch out a jammer by steering nulls. Frequency hopping tries to outrun a static spike. So they preloaded sweep tables tied to enemy band plans, then timed their pulses off known radar rotation rates. When a search dish came around, a jammer spike arrived a beat early, then a beat late, biasing the tracking gates. If a null tried to steer into the noise, a second drone offset the phase and moved the target. Even the jamming trucks in the convoy tried to shout back, but bursty counters worsened the multipath soup the swarm had already built. The payoff arrived fast. Short-range air defenses lost their automated cues and fell back to manual optics and slow slews. Launchers that hunted with data links now depended on what a gunner could see through glass. Turrets that could snap to a track now wobbled. In those minutes, the air above the road turned noisy and dumb. And with that, the corridor opened, just wide enough for speed and nerve to matter next. Because fast movers only need a sliver when the skies forget how to talk. Why split the strike? Because the second wave only works if you know exactly where the soft metal lives. The jammers bought minutes, not victory. Those minutes let pilots mark who mattered inside the column. Main battle tanks wearing explosive reactive bricks. Short-range air defense launchers with exposed radomes and sensor turrets. Command and control vans buried mid-pack with whip antennas and cluttered roofs. Bridges on trailers. Fuel bowsers tucked behind armor. Each piece has a weak face when you see it from above and from the side at the same time. And the second wave needed that picture locked before it crossed the wire. Now the math gets plain. You don't throw one volley and pray. You separate tasks so every hit counts. Tank tops are thin, but cages and ERA turn lazy angles into duds. Air defenses, even half-blind, can still scratch a drone if it moseys in on a steady line. A single rush feeds gunners a rhythm and bleeds away aircraft without cleaning the board. So the pilots set timing and angles like a trap, knowing the armor's habits and the blind spots the first wave carved. Each FPV came in cheap and mean. About $1,200 in frame and guts. Many running salvaged ESCs and motors pulled off broken racers. Standard 6 SLIPO packs for punch and short bursts. Analog video pushed through high-gain patch antennas to keep latency low and hold a usable picture under interference. Low-latency cameras wired straight to the transmitter. Nothing fancy to encode or decode, because a clean, fast feed means the pilot's hands can correct in the last half-second. Repairs stayed simple. Arms and plates swapped on a bench with a hex key, which is why this kind of fleet scales fast. Warheads did the heavy thinking. Shaped charges sat on tilt brackets to preserve standoff when the drone pitched into a dive. EFP-style liners handled the shots that needed to punch through grates and reach sensor blocks hiding behind thin skins. Contact fuses were tuned for turret roofs and engine decks, places where steel gets thinner and heat gives away exact aim points. A small change in fuse sensitivity makes the difference between blooming too early on a cage and biting into the plate below it. The geometry closed the deal. Pilots staged cross-axis dives from 20 to 40 meters AGL. Approach angles flexed between 60 and 120 degrees to slip past cages and go straight for optics, masts, and vents. No straight lines. Short, jagged corrections masked by trees, trucks, and heat shimmer. Arrivals layered by seconds, not minutes, to overload any manual gunner stuck scanning through glass. You can't track 3 angles at once if each one only shows for a blink. Targets fell in a fixed order. First, the air defense optics and launchers. Blind the spotters and nobody calls out the next threat. Second, the command vans and the bridging kit. Cut the brain and the road forward. Third, the tanks that stopped when the formation pinched and spacing collapsed. By then, exhaust plumes and reversed engines marked engine decks for clean hits. Crews who climbed out created more targets, because hatches left open show where to bury an EFP. The pilots navigated through jam by keeping it old school. Analog video stayed noisy but readable. Pre-marked terrain cues, culverts, lone poles, a square of fresh asphalt, anchored their lines when the picture warped. They flew brief GNSS off profiles and fell back to dead reckoning when static walked the image. Stick, throttle, 2 corrections, then commit. The result reads cold. 10 tanks out or stuck. Multiple launchers blinded. The road choked. $384,000 of airframes cutting into a formation priced in billions, all inside a tight window the jammers bought. The kills landed fast, but the ground didn't go quiet. Radios lit up across the sector, and now the next move had to consider what those calls would trigger and who would answer them. Blind first, strike second. That sequence turned cheap circuitry into decisive power. Ukraine's play in Kharkiv showed how a narrow window of electronic silence lets budget drones hit where heavy armor can't defend fast enough. The lesson is simple. Take away sensing and talking, and the most expensive steel becomes slow. If you want deeper breakdowns of the jammers, the warheads, and the flight paths, drop your questions and subscribe for the next field test analysis. The battlefield now rewards those who can steal a few minutes of vision. Use them well, and steel loses to solder, especially when the next convoy thinks its radios still matter.